50 to 70 billion rand in damages, disrupted 40,000 businesses and left more than 350 people dead. Only one insurer, state-owned SASRIA, stood between total ruin and recovery for thousands of entrepreneurs. We're joined in studio by Muzi, Dladla, SASRIA's Executive Manager for Stakeholder Relations, to unpack the final bill and what we've learnt about protecting the economy from civil unrest. Muzi, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you for having me, Hugo.
So let's talk about that $1 billion amount, claims to date, and just how many remain open.
We've reached about 99% of all the claims. I can say that the few ones that are still there, it's just one or two, and there's maybe one or two disputes, which we are just about to finalize. So in terms of that, I'd say everything has really been settled. And the final bill sits at around 32 billion rands. So that's what we had to pay as a SASRIA, as a total.
Okay, so we talk about the amount of damage, somewhere in the region of 50 to 70 billion. You only paid 32. Why?
It's because SASRIA is an insurance company owned by the state. So we're the only company that deals with such civil commotion damages and all of that. So it is not compulsory. I think that's the first thing to mention. So, and it is largely a whole lot of businesses that have insurance that get to attach SASRIA on top of that. So the difference is really everybody else that did not have insurance, that was not covered. So that then is the difference between the 32 and the estimated 50 to 70 billion.
So since then, has there been an uptake of SASRIA insurance?
There has been an uptake.
Significant?
It's quite significant, I must add. But again, it is limited to all of those businesses that actually can afford insurance at this point.
Well, I suppose it's the onus is on every business to make a provision for insurance, because if you look at the amount of loss, right, you potentially lose everything. But there was cause for concern from the small businesses in particular. You said that the payout process was slow. What is SASRIA's average turnout, right, today versus 2022?
By turnout, you mean the number of days it takes to settle a claim?
Yeah.
I'd say it's around between 30 to 50 days, because it depends, again, depends on the number of claims. So the smaller claims like vehicles damage and all that, those are quicker to do. So we do it within a very short period of time. But the ones where there's a building that burnt down, I mean, you can understand there needs to be assessors that are appointed, there needs to be negotiation that takes place to get to the figure. There's also loss of income. That is also an insurable event. So it takes quite a bit of time to get to that. And sometimes we don't really pay out, we rebuild to avoid the whole thing of a business that decides to de-risk, that they rebuild, put them in the position that they were before. So it's a balancing act. So I wouldn't say it takes long. It's an average, really, if you compare it to your normal insurance companies out there.
I'm pretty interested in knowing just the amount of workforce that it took to sift through all these claims, right? I mean, as many as, I think we've talked about 40,000 businesses being impacted, huge amount. And when you talk about 32 billion worth of payouts, how many businesses are we talking about? And just how much how labor intensive was it?
It was a very difficult thing to do, because remember, there's just one entity. But we implement, our business model is a public-private partnership type of business model. So it's business to customer. So the entire insurance industry came to the party. So,
all right, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. We are going to take a quick break. Great conversation we're having right now with Muzi Dladla, Executive Manager, Stakeholder Relations at SASRIA. We're back in a moment. Don't go away. Thank you for staying with us. You're watching the PM edition of Newsfeed. Now, we're in studio with Muzi, Dladla, SASRIA's Executive Manager for Stakeholder Relations. And going back a few years, billions of rand worth of damage and almost an equal amount in payout. And you were just unpacking for us the intensity of the work that it took to sift through all these claims.
Yeah, I think the average, if you compare to other industries in other countries that have had similar incidents, even natural catastrophes, some it takes about up to 3 years to do because they do it alone. So for us, it was a lot quicker. I think within a period of 8 months to a year, we had paid about 80% of all of those claims. It's because we partnered with the entire industry. So all the insurance companies, we use their infrastructure because SASRIA alone just could never have been able to do this without the insurance industry. So it came to the party as well.
Now, we understand that the SIU is investigating some alleged cases of fraud. How big is that risk and what are some of the recovery strategies?
It's a small component if you look at it in terms of the amounts. But as we were going along during the July 2021 event, we found quite a number, not a lot in terms of the total quantum, but a very small amount, I'd say about 1 or 2% of all the claims that we clear-cut that were fraudulent. So we approached the SIU, actually, not really the other way around, to say these are big cases and they involve really big amounts. We needed them for assistance in pursuing that. So they are dealing with it as we speak right now. So as soon as they are out with the reports, then I suppose we can interrogate that at the time. So
what sort of concrete early warning indicators could help government avert another July 2021 event?
That's the biggest question, isn't it? So there are a couple of things we learned, because when a disaster like this happens, you don't always anticipate everything that happens. So there are two things really that came out. The Minister of Finance then, not Finance, Minister of Police then came out and said the intelligence that was received was not adequate enough to give rise for us to go into where everything was happening. It was 9 days, remember. And then the second part, so intelligence first one, the second part is the risk mitigations. The mitigations, some of them failed. So there are reports that talk about that. And then just generally customer education in respect of what people need to understand what it means to act in a particular way. So those were the three biggest ones. But in terms of intelligence, I think that's the biggest thing that we've done. The question is, what would we have done between then and now? Is that social media always talks about what's going to happen before things happen. So we had no excuse of saying we didn't have intelligence. So we've put systems together now where we've built models that gather intelligence for us. So we have various points of data collection. We've partnered with the private sector. For an example, the Consumer Goods Council. Remember, they have trucks that go everywhere and they have very good intelligence. The state has intelligence. We're gathering our own intelligence now. So the triangulation of all of those three sources of data into one. So we have a platform now. So we can tell you with a high correlation in terms of accuracy, information between 1 to 10 days, we can tell you what's going to happen, when, what, and that information is dynamic. So it keeps on updating our software. So at least in terms of that, that's one thing that I think we've done well. The other one is the mitigations. So the police responding as well as maybe the army, not necessarily that, it's just the time it takes to get to that we are now working with the state to minimize that, because it was 9 days, and if there was response within 3 days, the total exposure, you're talking about different numbers that are well within risk appetite in terms of insurance.
So this new intelligence that you are now able to collect obviously will allow you to deal with the possibility of riots if ever they were to occur again. But what else can you do with the information that you're collating? Because I'd imagine that it must be suited to other purposes as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, it's not just about response to civil commotion, because obviously that's the biggest risk, because the impact of that is quite big. But it also equips the state with really hands-on information in terms of what what the dissent is about. And it also helps with policy in terms of deciding as to what to do, where to solve whatever problems that there are. And that is the third part, the third thing that I spoke about, the consumer education part. So people still have the mentality of, if there's a protest, there has to be some sort of damage for the message to be heard, right? And if you look back to prior to 1994, it was a crime to do that, but it was part of the revolution, and people were able to be heard when they do that. Post-1994, it's no longer a crime, it's now the highest right on land. It's a constitutional right to do that, to protest. but not to destroy property. So the socialization of that right or that crime to becoming a right was never really done accordingly. So that's the consumer and citizen education part that needs to take place. You know, a simple example I'll give you would be that in the past, there's this theory of relative deprivation. It talks about if there are people who are dissenting about something, they will always fight those who are in the in group because they're outside. But nowadays, if I own a tire shop next to the road, I'm part of the out group, right? I'm not government, I'm not whoever it is that they are dissenting about. They would come and loot my tires and use that to destroy, but then the intent and the purpose is no longer serving the people. So I'm a citizen, so the biggest loser then becomes the citizens, extending inequality, and then the people that I'm employing are people from the very same community. So there's a lot of socialization of what this means to society, and I think it has a lot of weighting in terms of what we need to do about that.
Now, before we wrap, South Africa, KZN probably, to a very large extent, has almost become catastrophe capital, right, in the last few years. Those floods, year in, year out. How are you dealing with this, and how are various stakeholders, business owners dealing? Are they building a relationship with SASRIA? Because obviously they must have learnt when we had the first floods, if they didn't have insurance, to have insurance now.
That's a very good question. And it's a very big question. It's even bigger than SASRIA. So what has happened is that on the social risk side, so if you look at the fiscus, the two biggest risks that are contingent risks is natural catastrophes and then the social risks. So SASRIA takes care of the social risks to a large extent. On the natural catastrophe side, because drought is another issue that we could talk about that will lead us into serious troubles in the next few years. So there is currently no pooling of resources that will create enough reserves for, even at government level, the contingent reserves that have been kept are not sufficient to cover that. And the insurance that is there has been reducing. Between 2022 and now, I can assure you that the reinsurers have adjusted their capacity. Insurers that are insuring that have reduced. So there's a huge gap. And obviously, I'm sure you would have seen in our integrated report, the Minister of Finance requested that SASRIA starts getting involved in the natural catastrophe side. Obviously, it requires a mandate change and all of that. But that is the biggest risk, I think, that we are sitting with as well in terms of what might happen in the next future. Could be a drought, biggest drought, that leads to socio-economic issues where there's not enough water for people to drink. So what do we do about that?
So the Minister of Finance has made a suggestion. How much time from suggestion to actual practicality to it happening? Is it something that's sitting on your desk or on the desk of your colleagues at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. The only problem is that, remember, we are a licensed insurer and we get our mandate from the state. So the minister has given the intent, but the intent alone requires a legislative change because the founding legislation for us, it gives us the powers. So those powers need to be changed. As soon as that happens, then the license issue is quite easy, and the collaboration with the industry, we've already been talking about it for a number of years. I think it's just us being able to get our mandate changed. And as soon as that happens, I think you will see a change in terms of how we approach that risk, catastrophe risk.
Muzi, great chatting to you.
Likewise, thank you.
Muzi Dladla, SASRIA's Executive Manager for Stakeholder Relations, speaking to us about what's transpired since the July 2021 unrest and the 32 billion rand payout that has been paid out to various businesses. We'll stay with Newzroom Afrika because when we come back,